And Jane will be talking to us about rhino conservation and economic development in Southern Africa, past, present, and future. Thank you, Jane.
Thank you. Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. I am passionate about rhinos. It's okay. I am in awe of the role they have played historically in biodiversity increase in South Africa. And thanks to the brilliant choice of themes here, thinking big, Ian and I have started to think big, and we're inspired about a potential role that they would have in the future. So let's get to it. That's what I'm going to speak about, and adding to that on the bottom, I'm going to challenge this audience to what needs to be done to make this into a viable view. So, in the past, a small rump of less than 50 white rhinos were discovered in the confluence of the two Umfolozi rivers round about 1900. These were bred up by dedicated people in the Natal Parks Board, but by the 1960s, they had too many rhinos, and Dr. Ian Player had an inspiration. This was too many eggs in one basket, and M99 and the ability to translocate large mammals had just come onto the scene. And he started Operation Rhino, which over the period removed 2,648 southern white rhinos, and these had a huge impact. Just in South Africa, it trebled the amount of white rhinos, and it increased the number of range states in Southern Africa from just South Africa to 8 of them. And if you have a look there at the number of white rhinos, the arrow shows you where Operation Rhino started. And that initiation of translocating rhinos into previously unoccupied reserves, private game reserves, and throughout Africa and zoos throughout the world led to a huge increase in population. That's the South African population that we've got there. The peak of the white rhino population was about 23,000. And it's not just white rhinos that we have that. We also have it for black rhinos, except that that inflection point coincided with the black rhino, its expansion program under the control or the support of the WWF. So, and the real transformation, I must tell you, actually came from what it did to the landscape. So, overgrazed, stock farming to private game reserves, over 20 million hectares were transformed in South Africa. And the conclusion. Actually, when it comes to rhino conservation in Southern Africa, it's space that matters most. And is there space in Southern Africa where rhinos can be used to make another difference like they've made already? And this is where we took a leaf out of Namibia's book, and Chris, I know that you can do better, but you're doing very well. And so we looked to see whether we could do something similar in South Africa. Well, in KwaZulu-Natal, we have the Ngonyama Trust, which holds land that belongs to the Zulu nation under a trust headed by the Zulu king. It is a huge area, 28 million hectares, just about the same as the total of South African protected areas, both state and private game reserves. And if you have a look Ezemvelo, or what used to be called Natal Parks Board, that's only 1/14 of that Ngonyama Trust. So we're talking about a huge area. And if you have a look at what it looks like in large amounts, totally overgrazed. And for those of you who are going to be speaking about invasive aliens, you will recognize at the back there our good friends, the invasive aliens. So, can something be done with this land? We envisage a truly win-win empowerment deal. It would require strategic alliances, firstly, of course, with rural communities who would be paid custodians of initially surplus bulls. White rhino tend to throw about 52% bulls for some reason. And the rural communities would utilize their tradition of cattle herding, their unemployed youth, and their land. So they would be true partners, bringing items of real value to this partnership, not junior partners by any manner of means. Obviously, you'd need to have a strategic alliance with the Zulu King and the community indunas. And you would need organizations to monitor rhino husbandry and others to regularly trim the horn. And finally, a profit-sharing deal on the horn trimmings, and I will come back to that a little bit later. So what is needed for such a project? And I've got it not only in sort of the steps you would take, but each step is more difficult than the one before, of course. So the King's blessing, the identification of suitable communities, contiguous to existing protected areas would be the first targets. And I know that there are people here that know 10 times as much as I do about it. But in South Africa, in order to own wildlife, you need to have it properly fenced, a thing called a certificate of adequate enclosure. And white rhino, unfortunately, have been lumped in with other dangerous animals such as, or difficult to contain, such as lion and elephant. So in order to get a certificate of adequate enclosure, it's going to cost you between 500 Rand and 3,000 Rand per metre. If you're going to enclose one rhino bull territory, and I've taken 3 square kilometres, that's 7,000 metres, you're looking at between 3.5 million and 21 million per rhino bull. Far too expensive to roll out at scale. But, white rhino males actually are quite happy to stay in their territory. Give them food and grazing, and they chill. They are easier to handle than cattle. So, you take 40mm electrical horse tape, some steel stanchions, you have a 7,000 metre fence for less than 10% of the lowest cost of a traditional enclosure cost. And this is working on the Munyawana. It has also been approved on the Kubiini Private Game Reserve, no problem whatsoever. But I realize that this is up where you bump your head against bureaucracy, and this is most probably not going to be an easy task. So, will we allow the southern white rhino to be a conservation hero again? So the first thing we've spoken about is a certificate of adequate enclosure, but you cannot take subsistence farmers on the edge, encourage them to change their way of life, give them hope, and not give them a sustainable, secure income. And rhinos are unique. Number one, a rhino does not have to die for its horn. Number two, If a rhino's horn is regularly trimmed, it produces 5 to 8 horn sets in its life. However, at the moment, we cannot trade rhino horn internationally. There's a huge market, as we all know, in the East for rhino horn. So why aren't we taking advantage of it? Well, there's an organization called CITES that has pigeonholed rhinos in a certain area where international trade is not allowed. And they base this on 2 things. One is a precautionary principle, a very wise thing to have. It says, don't put your at-risk populations at risk. And they say, we don't know enough about the market. How big is it? Is it, price inelastic, demand inelastic? All of those things have validity. However, if you spoke to a proper marketer, he would laugh in your face. Nobody knows before they enter a market those things. And in fact, if it's been illegal, doubly you don't know it. They say, therefore, we don't know enough to make a decision to transfer rhino so that we can, rhino derivatives, so that we can trade them internationally. Absolute nonsense. We know precisely what the ban has done. At the start of the ban in 1977, there were 29 range states for rhino in Africa. 2 years ago, how many were there? 5. The ban has been catastrophic for rhino. To continue with it is putting a species that we have brought back from the brink of extinction at huge risk. But they say, there's other ways we can do it. We'll have this thing called demand reduction. What on earth is demand reduction? It is behavior modification. Now, once again, they say marketers will laugh, they will fall down dumbfounded if you tell them that you're going to do demand reduction. So I could give you all manner of case studies, but I'm not going to. I'm going to give you one word. Okay, it's a big word, triskaidekaphobia. Fear of the number 13. And let me tell you, if you are traveling on these airlines, and many, many others, don't expect to sit in row 13. So, nobody knows where this fear of the number 13 came from. It's first mentioned in 1220, 800 years ago. We have not changed that silly belief. So, how on earth do we think we are going to change the Eastern belief in the medicinal properties of rhino horn that is in a 3,000-year-old pharmacopoeia? To continue with this demand reduction is folly bordering on reckless negligence. Afrikaans has a good word for it, dommerstrand. So, to just quickly go over what I've spoken to you about today, and I do realize that I've skipped along a whole lot. Every one of these things have got many arguments buried in them, and I'm happy over a bit of hydration to discuss this with whoever. So all rhinos need to be the heroes again is space, a system, and a sustainable income stream. Now, this is on us, on you. Will we amend the regulations for a certificate of adequate enclosure so that we can do this? And will we have the fortitude to render the CITES ban on the international trade in rhino horn irrelevant? We don't need that done in the short term, but certainly in the medium term. So, ladies and gentlemen, here are our contact details. We're happy to answer any questions.
We have, there we go. We got time for one question.
Hi, thanks so much. That was super interesting. And yeah, I never really thought about it in terms of changing the mindset, taking that long. But in terms of the barriers to the trade ban through CITES, as I understand it, it's not actually CITES as its own organization, it's the parties to CITES that are blocking the ban. Primarily, I think I'm from the UK, so I can say this. I think it's mainly coming from Europe and America and all these countries, and I know that the EU votes as one group, and so they have 32 votes as one. So, if you can't change and a lot of those people are very anti in terms of the animal welfare and those ideas. So if you can't change the mindset of the East in terms of demand reduction, how are you going to change the mindset of those people that are effectively stopping the trade ban to convince them it's a good idea?
You don't. You make them irrelevant.